Good morning, good morning. Today we are continuing to talk about compositional layout. Especially today, we'll be talking about nesting groups. So far, we haven't nested any groups or items, but today we'll take a look at what nesting is. And also, we haven't done horizontal scrolling with our collection views. So today we'll take a look at what's known as orthogonal scrolling. Basically, what orthogonal means is at a right angle. So if I have my vertical collection view, I could also scroll horizontally using orthogonal scrolling. With orthogonal scrolling, it adds a lot of flexibility and very fast the way we're able to implement really cool features with orthogonal scrolling as far as like paging is concerned of our items. So today, those are the two things we'll take a look at. One is nesting groups, and two, using orthogonal scrolling. And we'll also continue to build upon the knowledge we've acquired as of last week with using supplementary boundary items to create a header view and such, okay? So we'll be building an app from scratch, and at the end of the day, our app will look very similar to what we have here rendered in this screenshot. This is what we're gonna have with 3 sections, with orthogonal scrolling where you could scroll horizontally, and we'll have different paging behaviors on each section. To overview what we'll be building this particular application. It's a collection view. The collection view takes the entire screen width and height. In that collection view, we have 3 sections, right? This is a section here, this middle section. We also have a bottom section, and we have a top section. Each of those sections has groups. So we'll have a nested group. The nested group is denoted by the yellow border. Inside that nested group, we'll have an inner group. That inner group will have the items. The way we'll lay out those items, we lay out those items vertically. So this particular group that we see here in blue, it will have 2 items laid out vertically, right? So we'll use the initializer that specifies how many items you want to be laid out in that particular group. And we'll say we want to lay out 2 items in that particular group. And at the end, the nested group itself will be laid out horizontally. So again, the nested group will be laid out horizontally, and the inner group will be laid out vertically, which gives us flexibility to also use that same sort of layout logic to lay out the 2 other sections here, where the inner group is still vertical, but it's only 1 item, very similar to the last section. The inner group is vertical, 1 item, and the nested group is horizontally laid out. So this is the overview of what we'll be building. Again, to reiterate what compositional layout is made of, the smallest part of a compositional layout is the item. The item is the smallest part. This is the first thing we build out. Then the container of the item is the group. So the item is constrained, if you want to use that word, based on its group or based on its container. Its container is the group. The group's container, in that case, is also a group, but that nested group's container is what? What's the nested group's container?
Is it the section?
It's the section. Very good. So we build inward, outward. So we start with the item, we go to the group, then we go to the section, and at the end, we return the layout. This entire view that we see here is a layout. So this is the way we compose our views. That's why we call this compositional layout. We compose different components to make one layout. So our objectives will be nesting groups using compositional layout. We'll be using orthogonal scrolling. Again, orthogonal scrolling is at right angles. If I have vertical scrolling, if I want to have it horizontally scrolling, I need to set the orthogonal scroll on my section. And now I could also scroll from right to left or left to right. Also, we'll build a header view, and we'll be seeing different types of orthogonal scrolling. What we'll be doing is creating an enum that holds our section information, and also will tell us what behavior a specific section is. So with an enum, it becomes very flexible with the way you could set up your sections, because now I could say, if I'm dealing with the 3rd section, I want to return a continuous orthogonal scroll or whatever it is, okay? So this is the overview of what we'll be building. Any questions before we start building? Any questions whatsoever about compositional layout? Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and open up a new Xcode project. And let's use a name where we could get back to that project very easily. So we'll create a new project. It's a single view application. We'll call this nested groups orthogonal scrolling. So this is what we're dealing with today. This is what we name our project. And now we'll go ahead and click next. I'll save this to my desktop and I'll create. Okay. I'll make sure to change my zoom level here. Okay. As always, I've documented the lesson as well. So if you want to follow along with the lesson, feel free to do so. The first thing we should really grab here from the lesson, because we're not going to do this from scratch, we're very familiar with creating views programmatically. Our cell here is a label cell, because our collection view, again, doesn't have a default cell to use. So go ahead, go to the lesson, and grab the label cell, right? Just grab the code that says label cell. We'll come back to the header view later. But for now, just grab the label cell and let's go to our project. So in our project, we'll create a new file. It's a CocoaTouch class. Its subclass is UI collection view cell, and the name is label cell, right? So label cell, subclass of UI collection view cell, create. And go ahead and just paste over what you copied from the lesson link right here and build. Make sure you have no errors at this point. So build, make sure you have no errors. What do we have here? One good practice to use if you're creating a cell, instead of saying label cell literal everywhere in your code, you could simply create a static constant here called reuse identifier. And the way we'll access our reuse identifier is just say label cell dot reuse identifier. So for example, here, if we want to get access to our reuse identifier, we'll just say label cell dot reuse identifier. So that will prevent us from having weird bugs places, right? So we have it defined one place, we'll just use it this way. What do we have here? I'm sorry?
Can you send that code? Because I don't know what's going on with my internet. I've been trying to open up the link for like the past, I don't know.
The link from Slack?
No, from Canvas.
Oh, not Canvas, it's on Slack.
Well, all right, my Canvas is still not working. And you guys have gone a bit.
1 second, let me increase the volume here.
Which one from Slack?
It's on Slack at 10:06 a.m. No, sorry.
Okay.
7:46 a.m.
And okay, well, this is opening. Okay.
You got it? Okay, cool. So what do we have here? We have a label cell with one text label or one UI label, and that's all we have here, nothing else, and it's constrained to be centered. So let's go ahead and go to our view controller and continue writing our code. All right. What did I want to use here? So far, we've been doing collection views via storyboard, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so today let's just take a look at how to do it via programmatic. So we won't use storyboard, we'll just use programmatic here. So we'll say private, I'm sorry?
What kind of cell is it again?
It's a label cell,
I know.
collection view cell.
I think he's sorry.
No, you're welcome. So we'll create our collection view programmatically today. UI collection view. Okay. Let's also go ahead and set up our data source. Very similar to what we did last week, we'll create a type alias so that we are not retyping UI collection view diffable data source everywhere. So we'll just create a type alias here, which is a moniker for some type. And here the type name will be data source. We could give it any name. And the expression is UI collection view diffable data source. And our diffable data source, the item, actually we don't have an item right now. That's gonna come from our enum type. But for now, to get rid of errors, just say your item is an int and your section is an int and your item is also an int. We'll come back and we'll change those values later.
Alex,
yes.
Can you please make the font
bigger?
Here? Yeah.
Okay. Bigger. Okay, cool. Very good. Let me make some more space here. Great. Awesome. Thank you. So we have our type alias. Now let's actually define our type. Our type is data source and it's data source. Implicitly unwrapping it. So this is what we have so far. All right. Let's continue on. Now we need to go ahead and create our layout. Very similar again to what we did last week. We'll create a function called create layout that will return us some UI collection view layout. Okay. So this function will return us the layout we are going to use for our collection view. In that case, we have a layout which has 3 sections, and 2 of the sections are very similar, and 1 of the sections are different. So that's what we'll be doing today, using this create layout function. So let's go ahead and continue building out our layout. Again, the parts of a compositional layout, the smallest part is an item. An item belongs to a group, or its container is a group. The group's container is a section. And at the end of all this, we are returning a layout, okay? So we start off with the smallest part, then we go to the group, then the section, then we return the layout, okay? Any questions before we continue? Feel free to stop me. So let's go ahead and define our layout. Very similar to what we did with the multiple sections, yes, last week, where we had a layout, a section provider. So with our UI collection view layout, compositional layout, UI collection view, compositional layout. Last week, we mentioned there's 2 ways to create a layout. One way is to create a layout using a section. And the other way is to use a layout using what's known as a section provider, right? So one way is to create a layout using a section, right? So let's just document this. 2 ways to create a layout. One way, use a given section. The second way, use a section provider, which takes a closure, which is what we're going to be doing today. And the reason why we're doing step 2 is because each section is different. So instead of just returning one section, which is the same, we'll be using the section provider here. The section provider closure gets called, let me put some notes here. The section provider closure gets called for each section, okay? So this closure will be writing gets called for each section. In that case, we have 3 sections, so they'll be called for each of those sections and return the layout. So UI collection view compositional layout, we said we'll be using the initializer that takes in a section provider, not the section provider with the configuration. We'll just use the section provider, press enter. that section provider has two arguments. The first argument is the actual section. We'll call this section index. The second argument is the layout environment. We'll take a look at what that looks like tomorrow, hopefully, if we get a chance to after our lesson tomorrow. But the layout environment basically says it gives you the width of the device you're running on. So you could say, if I have a wider width, let's go ahead and lay out more items. If I have a small,
was it was the section not the section provider.
Yeah, the section provider, not the one with the configuration.
Oh, okay. So
you got it? You're breaking up.
Yeah, so not the one is, and yeah, I see layout environment.
Yep,
yeah.
Very good. The one that has section provider with two arguments, section index, we call it section index, and the second argument, we call it layout environment.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so there we are. We have our layout. Now we could return our layout. Okay, because at the end of the day, we need to return a layout. Our function says we are returning a layout. So we return a layout here. But we're not done because we need to return a section as well. This closure returns a section. So whatever code we are doing in here, in that closure, we have to return a section. So let's go ahead and start building out our layout. Any questions so far with what we've discussed? Good? Okay. So let's continue building. We'll start off with, we have an item, we have a group, we have a section, and that's what we have. We have the layout at the bottom here. This is our layout. So those are the four components of any sort of layout you are working with. You have your item, right? You have your item, you have your group, you have your section, and you return a layout. All right, let's start off with the item. So our item needs a size. So we start off with item size. And here for the item size, we define it by using this type called NS collection layout size, right? NS collection layout size takes two arguments, a width and a dimension. Sorry, a width and a height. So the initializer takes in two arguments, a width dimension, which is of type NS collection layout dimension, and a height dimension. So go ahead and use the initializer that takes in those two arguments. For our width dimension, as we mentioned last week, we have a variety of different ways we could set sizes. One of those ways is fractional width. So the fractional width of the container, in that case, the items container is the group. So whatever the group's width is, we'll take the entire width of the group in that case. So we'll say fractional width, and we pass in some CG value, which is 1.0. So 1.0 defines the entire space, right? 100%. Next, we go to the height dimension. For that one, we'll say fractional height. And here we'll say 1.0 as well. And again, very similar to what we did last week, those numbers, we could always override those numbers. So later we'll see how we overwriting those numbers with the items. Because if we go back to our layout in the lesson, in our layout, if we say the width, our circle, keep your eye on the circle here. We say the circle, we want it to take up the entire width of the blue area. The blue area is the group. And we're also saying we want it to take the entire height, right? In that case, we'll have one item. But keep in mind that if we are setting up a vertical group, we could say how many items we want. If you say how many items you want, it's going to overwrite the dimensions that we put here. Everybody, is that clear to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
So it'll,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Question? Go ahead.
sorry, so it'll take up 100% of its container until you have more than one item, at which point it'll be calculated how much space it needs.
Very good. Very, very good. Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Very good.
I think I interrupted somebody. I'm sorry.
No, I needed clarification about it. Thank you.
Does that help you, Chelsea?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, very good. Very good explanation there, Greg. So here we have item size. Let's keep going. So let's create our item. Our item is of NS collection layout item. Right? Our item is of type NS collection layout item. And that item, we will pass in the size. This is why we created the size first, to pass in the size. So the size is going to be item size, like that. So now we have an item. Great. Okay. We said we are dealing with nested groups today. So this item we've created. Now we need to go ahead and create this blue group here, which is we'll call inner group. So we now need to create this first group here, which we'll call inner group. The inner group needs a size. That size is going to be 50% of the width of the container, and it will take the entire height of the container. Does everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, very good. And that's going to apply to the section down here as well. It's going to take 50% of the width and 100% of the height. Okay, cool. Let's do that. Let's go down to our group section and say inner group size. So same NS collection layout size. And this time we said the width dimension, same fractional width. We said it's going to be what? 50%, right?
Yep.
And we said the height is also fractional height. It's going to take up 100%. What's 100%?
1.0.
1.0. Very good. Great. So now we have the inner group size. Now let's go ahead and set up the inner group. Inner group. We start off by saying NS collection layout group this time, not an item, it's a group. And how did we say we want to lay out this particular group here, the inner group? Was it vertical, horizontal?
Orthogonal. No, horizontal.
The blue group, right?
The blue is up and down.
Yeah, so vertical, right?
Yeah.
Very good. So the blue group will be laying it out vertically, right?
Mhm.
Top down. Okay, so here we'll say NS collection layout group dot. Last week we used horizontal only. This week we'll actually use vertical here. So vertical, we'll use the initializer that takes account. Everybody sees the initializer that takes account argument as well?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So here, our layout size we have, it's called inner group size. So we'll say inner group size here. For the sub item, what's the item we add in? Well, the item we add in is item. And here, you could put the count. How many items do we want? Well, we have sections that takes 2, we have sections that takes 1. So we need somehow to figure that out. So for now, we'll just say 201, which is an error, but we need to fix that. So this is the first place where we come in where something is different, right? So the inner group could have 2 items stacked, one on top of the other, or it could have 1 item, if we go back to our diagram. It could have 2 items stacked, one on top of the other, which is vertical, or it could have 1 item, right? So we need a way to define that, okay? With that, we'll start building out our enum to return us some value. So let's take a pause with our create layout. Let's go create an enum that returns us. If I'm dealing with some section, return me 2. If I'm dealing with a next section, return me 1. Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So let's go build our enum out. We could keep our enum, let's just keep it out here for now. We'll create an enum, we'll call it section kind at the top of our class. It's going to have a raw value of an integer. This is gonna come in handy. And it's also gonna be case iterable, so we know how many items it has or how many cases it has. We have 3 sections. So we'll start off by saying case first. we'll say case second, and we'll say case third. Okay, go ahead and build. If anybody needs any extra time, please let me know. Okay, so this is what we have. We have our section. It's called, our sections are gonna be of type section kind. So we need to update our section identifier here. But now let's just go ahead and write some computed property. This computed property will return the number of items to vertically stack. Okay, so here we'll say item count is going to be an int, right? Doesn't deal with doubles. It has to be a whole value, a whole number. So this int count will actually use a switch statement on our self, right? So this self here represents the instance of section kind. So for example, section kind, right? This is self, right? This self refers to the self that we created, the instance that we created of this section kind here. Everybody with me?
Yes.
Feel free to ask any questions here whatsoever. So we have our item count, we're switching on self, and if it's the first case, so case.first, how many items do we want to return?
1.
So if it's the first,
Oh, sorry, 2.
2, very good. So we'll return 2. Otherwise, we'll just default. Otherwise, we return what?
1.
1. Very good. Thank you, sir. All right, so this is our first little computed property that we'll use in our create layout function. So let's go ahead and update or refactor some types before we continue. So everybody has this item count computed property, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the first refactoring we'll do, our section identifier is no longer an integer, it's a section kind, okay? If we build, we'll have error spaces. So the first place we change our int value is on our diffable data sources. The section type identifier is section kind from our enum. And the next place we need to change is in our NS diffable data source, not NS diffable data source, sorry. No, that's it, sorry. I haven't defined the NS diffable data sources. So we are good. This is only the one place we changed our section kind here. So at this point, we should only have one error coming from our create layout. So now we have a way to know what section we're dealing with. Kind of, not really. How do we know that? Well, we still got to do some logic here. We have our enum, so let us figure out what section we are dealing with. We'll use a guard statement here. We'll create an instance of our section kind called section kind. And the way we create an instance of that section kind is using the section kind enum. And it passes a raw value. This is why we used the raw value integer earlier. So now the raw value that we pass in here is, what value am I passing in here for the integer value?
First?
Take a look at our section identifier arguments. Our section provider arguments.
Oh, section.
Section index, very good. So the section index tells us what section we have. How many sections do we have? I'm sorry?
3.
3.
Can you go back to?
Yeah.
Go back to,
Well, actually, I guess we have it open too.
yeah, we have 3 sections. We haven't defined it in our data sources yet, but we will, actually, we kind of defined it. We said in our enum here, we have 3 sections. Everybody with me?
Yep.
All right, very good. So to continue on, we have our section kind, and here we have 3 sections. If we have 3 sections, they will be this way. The first section will be 0, second will be 1, third will be 2. Why?
I'm sorry, can I ask a question real quick?
Yep, go ahead.
So when building out these sections, there's really only 2 types. There's kind of like A and B, where you have 2 items stacked vertically in the first section, and then for the next 2, it's 1. So is it just like a layout preference in terms of code and design?
Yes, design.
First, second, and third.
Design
Okay.
for sure, because this I just use for the lesson, but it could be easily in your challenge. You have this to build, which is the App Store.
Okay, I just want to know, I guess my question is there any reason why we wouldn't be using a simpler enum where it's just kind of like 2 or 1, so to speak, where you have 2 items stacked or 1 item stacked?
I mean, you could be very flexible, but the way I'm building this out here is to show us how we could use the enum to make it even more flexible for us, like what we return from our section.
All right, yeah, that's pretty much what I was trying to confirm, because here, second and third are being treated the same.
Yes, that's why we return 1.
Cool, all right.
Yep,
thank you.
Yep, I mean, we could have done like a ternary operator inside of our function here, but now we could use this enum anywhere we want. Like it's reusable now, as opposed to tying it up in the create layout.
Right, we can expand on it. We can have it do all sorts of things.
Yep,
gotcha.
Exactly. We could use this again for our challenge, homework, whatever. Yep.
Is it just a matter of preference, like whether or not, like, would Swift UI be better for this? Would this be better than?
We're still heavily talking about UI kit. So
yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like, is there is one better than the other type of, like, when you compare the two, or is it just a matter of preference?
I mean, this API, if it came like 5 years ago, this was going to be even greater and really awesome for the community. But it came, unfortunately, together with Swift UI. Right?
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Like, it looks like they're just coming out with a bunch of different ways to.
Yep. It I would say like the way they went about recreating the way we program in iOS, it helped out both UIKit and Swift UI, obviously. But UIKit a lot, because now UIKit is using the same sort of like paradigm to say I'm composing things as opposed to being like procedural. So the paradigm is very similar to Swift UI. But as a UIKit developer, this is the better API as opposed to the other APIs we used before.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing some collection view that has any sort of complexity, you should definitely use compositional layout.
Okay.
But if you're doing Swift UI, I'll just stick to what Swift UI native components are.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Very good. Very, very good.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, so good questions coming in. So we have our section kind. We know why we're using our int rot value now, because now we could construct it using this raw value. So if I say int 0, it's going to return me the first case. If I say case 1 here, it's going to return me the second case and the third case accordingly. So now we have our section kind instance. And if we recall earlier, when I said this self here refers to the section kind instance, this is the instance we have now. So now I could say section kind dot item count, and it will return me 2 or 1. So let's go ahead and do so. So right here where I have 2 or 1, I'll simply say section kind dot item count, and this is going to return us 2 or 1 here. Everybody sees this? Okay, great. So now we have our vertically stacked container. Let's go out to creating our nested group now. So let's go create our.
Real quick, we have the guard statement above, but it's not returning.
We have the guard statement above. Oh, sorry, we're not done with this. So else, thank you. Let's just do fatal error here. Thank you, Chelsea. I'll just say. Could not section. Awesome, thank you. Great. So now we could use this. There's no errors here. And now let's continue on to build our nested group. So I'll say nested group also needs a size. So now let's take a look at what our nested group looks like. So not this one. Our nested group here is the yellow. Keep your eye on the yellow. So the yellow, the way we want to set that up is we want the width again to be the width of the container, which is the section. So take up the entire width, and we want it to be a square, right? So if I want it to be a square, I'll say go ahead, take up the entire width, and the height is also the width. Everybody with me on that one?
Yeah.
Okay,
yep.
So this is what we're gonna do. And for the second and third, it's gonna be somewhat similar. We'll say half, because I also want it to be a square, but just of one item. So I'll say half of the container is gonna be the height. Everybody with me? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so nested group size here, let's go ahead and build it out. So NS collection layout size, the width, we said the width is gonna be fractional width of the container, and the height, well, that's the very similar case here. For now, I'll say fractional height, or fractional width rather, is the same. But that's not what we want. We got to do some refactoring here, because the height, the width is the same. That's fine, right? Both of those have the same width. Everybody with me? The yellows. Hello?
Yeah.
Both the yellow groups have the same width, but the heights are different. So we also need to somehow change what this returns us. So here we either want the full width or half the width of the container, right? So either we want the full width, in that case it's a square, or we want half the container, which is still a square, but one item, okay? So how do we do that? Well, this height dimension is of type NS collection layout. What's that? Okay, no worries. All right, so this height dimension is of NS type collection layout dimension. So let's go ahead back to our enum. And this time we'll say we want to return some sort of, we'll call it nested group height, okay? Just keep, let's just do that. So let's go to our enum and we'll create one more property here. We'll call it nested group height. Okay, and the return type is NS collection layout dimension, right? This NS collection layout dimension is the two types we have on a size, because the size has a width dimension and a height dimension. The types of those are NS collection layout dimension. So this is what we need to return. We'll use our switch statement again here. And we'll say case first. That's the only one that really changes. I'll say break for now. And next is just gonna be default. And break. Okay. So for the first, we said, what do we wanna return? Well, we wanna return the fractional width of the container 100%. So the width and the height is the same. Questions? I'm gonna pause for questions here with the first case.
No, because that's the first one where it's a square.
What's that?
So it makes sense because that's the first section that's square.
Okay. Okay, very good. Just
So this just makes it, it quicker to access that dimension?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. As opposed to, again, the less code we write in our layout, the better here in that particular case. So now we have the first one. The second one is going to be very similar. We'll say return, in our case here, what do we want to return actually? We want to return half, we said. So fractional width is 0.5, okay? Again, this is the height, right? The height of the container it takes the width, half of it. So I'm gonna have one square as opposed to two squares. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is our nested group height, and let's continue on to use it. Instead of our height dimension here, we will say section kind dot nested group height. Cool. And now we could go on to create our nested group. Nested group. Nested group, NS collection layout group. How are we laying out this group? Is it vertically or horizontally?
Hello.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Above enum for the
Above enum. 1 second, everybody. Above enum.
when you did the fraction, why is it that fractional width again and not the fractional height?
Okay, very good question. Because if we go back to the sketch here, so pay attention to left to right. So left to right is the width of the section, correct?
Yes.
If I want it to be a square, I will use the same width here for the height.
Okay.
Okay, that's for the first case. The second case, same thing. I want the inner items to be a square. So I'll use the width, right? And the height will be half the height of this width.
Okay.
Good?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you, thank you. Definitely jump in there. So let's continue here. So now the question was, how are we laying out our nested group? Our nested group is the yellow box. How are we laying it out? Is it vertically or horizontally? How are we laying out the items inside of it?
Horizontally?
Horizontally, very good. So if we start from the first item here, we go to the second item horizontally until there's more items. If there's more items, we just keep adding them horizontally. Everybody with me?
Yep.
Okay, very similar to the second and third, horizontally until it's off screen, and then we start scrolling because there's more items to see. In the scroll view, a collection view is a scroll view. As you have more items, it's gonna start scrolling to show you more items. Very good. So here we have NS collection view layout, and we said horizontally. We said horizontally. And now we're not using the count, right? We don't want to say how many items to add horizontally. We'll just go ahead and use the first initializer that we first used in class. The layout size is going to be the nested group size. And the items will be an array of items. Well, the items we're going to put in here is in a group, right? The inner group is the blue group. This is what I want to add to my container. So now we have our nested group done. We could go do our section. Section equal to NS collection section. And we just pass in our group. Well, our nested group. And don't forget to return your section. Like that. So at this point, we shouldn't have any warnings or errors. We've gone through setting up our layout, and I almost have everything on screen if I take out that white space here. So we started with our item size. We gave that a size. We went to our item. We added our size to our item. We went to our inner group. We set up our width to be 50 of the width of the, because 50, again, left to right, blue is 50% of the width. We went to our height dimension. We said, take up the entire height of your group. So from our blue group takes from bottom to top, the entire height. Same with our other two sections. Bottom to top takes the entire height. That's why we said fractional height, take up the entire thing, 100%. We said inner group, go ahead and add the item. We just created a top. How many items you want in your vertically stacked group? Well, the enum will tell us that. Either we have 2 or we have 1. Next, we go to our nested group size, which is the yellow box. We said we want the width of it to be the entire width of the container. In that case, the container is the section. And we said we want the height to be somewhat dynamic, because now if you did it with the first section, I want the height to be the same as the width. So that creates a box or a square. And I also want my other section here to have a different height as opposed to the first one. In that case, it's going to be 50% less than whatever this is, okay? And we added our section and we return our section in the closure. And again, the section provider closure gets called every time a new section renders. And at the end, we return our layout. And that's the majority of the lesson here. Let's go continue building out our view controller, okay? Any questions before we continue? Anybody stuck? Okay, so let us write a function to configure our collection view. Our collection view hasn't been initialized yet, so let's go ahead and do so because we're doing this programmatically. If it wasn't programmatically and we were coming from storyboard, it was going to be very similar to what we did last week, where we said collection view, I want a new layout for my collection view, and I would just call create layout, right? That was coming from storyboard, but we're coming from programmatic today, so we'll say collection view gets initialized with a new collection view initializer that takes in some frame and a layout, okay? So make sure you use the initializer that takes in a frame and a layout. So for the frame, we'll say take up the entire bounds of our view, which is the view of the controller. And then for the collection view layout, we'll say return the layout from the create layout function we just wrote. This returns the layout, so we use the layout right here. Great. Next, we'll say collection view, give us some background color. You could use any background color you want. I'll go with background. Next, we need to, what else do we need to do for our collection view?
Register the cell.
Register the cell, very good. Without that, we'll get a crash, guaranteed. So let's register the cell, register the cell. And our cell is called label cell. At this point, we all should have a label cell in our code from the lesson. This label cell is from the lesson. And we said label cell for the register cell. Sometimes we do this, right? In our case, we'll not do that. We'll just say label cell dot reuse identifier. So that's gonna prevent us from having errors because now we only have the literal one place. That literal is in my label cell. And I'll go on to say view.add subview collection view, like that. And for auto layout, I will use auto resizing mask. So I'll say auto resizing mask here. I'll say the width, make it the width of the device. And I'll say make the height the same, okay? And that should be it for the collection view setup. Make sure to call our configure collection view in our view did load. And we have one more piece of function to write, which is configuring the data source. And then we should be good to go. All right. How's everybody doing here?
One more second, or like minute, or
For folks who have a good handle on it, feel free to continue on. And you could always look at the lesson for any questions if you want to continue on to build out your data source, right? The data source is going to have 3 sections. We'll just populate the sections with arrays of numbers. And the one thing about the numbers, they can be repeating numbers because our data source, differable data source, works with unique numbers. They need to be hashable. So if you have repeating or duplicates, it's going to throw you an error or a warning rather. So just be mindful of that. All right, so we have our configure collection view. We have our create layout. We'll create our data source function down here. We'll say configure data source. And we're using differable data sources. So data source, again, this data source is nil right now. If we try to use it, it's going to crash. So we need to configure it. We need to initialize it. So here we'll say, we'll initialize it with our data source type, right? This is our type alias, which wraps around UI collection view diffable data source. So now I don't have to type in UI collection view diffable data source here anymore. I just say data source. And our data source, we want to use the initializer that takes in a collection view. So here we pass in our collection view, and our cell provider, very similar to what we did in table views and collection views last week. Our cell provider has 3 arguments. The first one is the collection view itself. The second one is the index path. The third one, it shows an int because this is our item identifier. So here I'll just say item for now, but this item could easily be your custom type. And this is what we have. So now we need to go ahead and configure our cell. Configure cell and return cell. All right, let's configure our cell very similar to what we do for cell for row. We'll say guard let cell. We'll downcast to the cell we expected. We'll use collection view. We'll dequeue a cell, not a header, a cell. The reuse identifier, very similar to what we did up top, we'll say the name of the cell, which is a label cell, dot reuse identifier. And for the index path, we just pass an index path. We typecast it to the type we expect, which is a label cell. Okay. And here, if we don't get
looks like you might have a
error.
Sorry, it looks like you might have a few too many L's in collection view on line 98.
In collection view, right here.
And 96. Yeah, 98 too.
Thank you, sir. Very good. Okay, so here we have our fiddle error. We'll say could not dequeue cell. But on line 101, we do have a cell if we get there. So we could say return cell. Missing return, what am I? I'm in here. Oh, yeah, I'm good. Xcode is just being a bit slow. Mondays. So I return a cell. Let me configure my cell. I'll say cell.text label.text equal to some sort of string. The string, I'll just say item. Item in that case is example 1, right? Or 2. Right, based on whatever values came in, our item is an integer, right? So item, our item here, item is int. Okay, good. So we have our cell. What else we want to do? Well, let's give it a background color. People know I love orange, so feel free to use whatever color you want. At this point, you're probably tired of orange, but I love orange. I give it a background color. This is fine. I could give it some sort of corner radius, which is 10, which is a soft corner radius. And that's all we have here. So our cell is pretty configured. Let's go to create our snapshot or initialize, create initial snapshot. Our initial snapshot is going to be somewhat static. So we have our snapshot here. Here we cannot use our type alias because this is a different type. That type is NS diffable data source snapshot, which expects the types to be very similar or exactly the same as you have for your diffable data source. So the first type here is what? What type am I putting into my generic here? Our section type is what?
Section kind.
Section kind, very good. So section kind, and what is our item type?
Int.
A what?
Int.
Int, very good. So those are the 2 types we have. We initialize it. And before we forget, just get in the habit of the minute you create your snapshot variable, just go ahead and say data source apply. Because if you don't apply, it's not going to activate. And animating differences, we're just passing false. And now let's go ahead and populate our sections. Populate the sections. In that case, we have 3 sections. 3 sections. So we'll say snapshot dot append. We're using the initializer that takes in 2 arguments, the one that takes in an array of identifiers and a section. So the array of identifiers, we'll just pass in an array here. We'll make an array on the fly. The way you make an array on the fly, you say array initializer, and you pass in some values. In that case, we want to go from 1 to, let's say, 20. And in the section, the first section, so in the first section, we'll have 20 items. Same thing for the second section. Second section, we'll say array and 21 to 40. Why am I saying 21 here and not 20?
Because if they're over,
Yes. So what Tiffany is saying, if you have duplicates, you'll get a warning really quickly, and performance will be very inconsistent with how your cells are rendering. So be very careful here. If you're just doing this for testing purposes, you cannot have duplicates. What's that?
So that's exactly what I was saying.
Exactly. You're breaking, you're going in and out a little bit.
Oh, it's probably my AC, to be honest.
The AC. Yeah, today is a hot day. Oof.
Is it better now?
Yeah, I could hear you better now. And the last one, we have array, and here we'll say from 41 through 60. That's fine. And we're putting this in the third section, and that's what we have. So we've populated our sections, we've applied the data source to the, we've applied the snapshot to the data source, and lastly, just make sure to call configure data source. And at this point, we should start seeing items. Okay, so let's go up for a second. And in our viewDid load, call configure data source. Did everybody finish writing out the data source function, this one? Anybody needs more time? Are we good? Okay.
You can run it there.
Was that Tiff?
In the viewDid load.
In the viewDid load, we called configure data source.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. So this is good. Let's actually test out our app and see what's going wrong, what's going well. So let's go ahead and run our app. And my app should be here. Hey, we're not seeing anything. What's happening? Well, what's happening here? Looks like we have a warning. There are currently no sections. Ha. Let's go fix that. Did everybody get that error?
Yes.
There are currently no sections because we have no sections yet. So let's go to the data source and do one more thing here. Populate the sections, but there's no sections to populate. So let's actually add the sections. So snapshot.append sections, an array of sections, first, second, and third.
Oh, wow, look at that.
Okay, so don't forget this. And again, we got a good error. It tells us exactly what happened. So now if we run the app again, now it looks like we have things happening already. Look at that, right? We could scroll, there's items. It's great, right? But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But what do we want to do here? We want to first divide our sections and we want to scroll horizontally. First of all, did everybody get their cells or their sections rendered?
Yeah.
The items showing? Okay, good. So we did the first part of the lesson, believe it or not, even if you're not seeing it exactly on screen. But we have 3 sections here. You're not seeing them clearly. We'll go ahead and we'll fix that as we keep building out our create layout function and add in some offsets to our items and also orthogonal scrolling, which we also said we're going to talk about. So let's go to our create layout function.
Alex,
yes. You're getting an error message? What's the error say?
In configure data source function, it says found nil while implicitly unwrapping an optional value on the data.
Did you do data source equal to data source here?
Yeah, collection view.
What is nil?
Fatal or unexpectedly found note. I'm not sure.
Let me. It's just the configure, right? You said.
Yeah, the
This guy?
configured data source.
All right. Let me send that out to you.
Unexpectedly found note one.
Is anybody else getting that error that Chelsea's getting? Chelsea says she's finding a nil value somewhere. All right, I sent it out to you.
Okay, thank
And
you.
keep us up to date.
Okay.
All right, so we have our layout. Last week we saw how to add section or item insets. So let's go ahead and add item insets. So navigate to your item where it says let item equal. And then here we'll give it some, actually, let's do something better. Let's say let spacing or item spacing. That way, if you want to play the numbers, you play if the number is one place. So let item spacing, it's a CG float. We'll say, let's make it 5. And now we'll say item dot content insets equal to, the type is NS directional edge insets. It takes in 4 arguments. A top value, which will just say item spacing for everything to keep it consistent. So item spacing for all 4 values, item spacing. So item spacing will say 5 padding around, actually not padding, but more like make my item smaller by setting some inset to it of 5 points. So if you run the app again, by just adding that, we should easier see our items like this, right? You can see the items better, but now we could still just scroll vertically. I want to also be able to scroll horizontally, right? Right now we cannot do that. Is everybody able to get their content insets the way I have it on screen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. If anybody needs extra help, please let me know. Okay, so now let's talk about orthogonal scrolling. I want to be able to scroll my items horizontally. How do I do that? On my section has, let me get some more space here. On my section, it has a property called orthogonal scrolling behavior. So you type in section.orthogonal, you'll see orthogonal scrolling behavior. It has a variety of options. If you type in dot, it's an enum type. Here you have continuous group leading. We'll see some of those and feel free to play around with those as much as you want. But for now, let's just say continuous. Continuous means just like keep scrolling. There's no paging behavior, just continue scrolling. So with that one line of code, we should now get horizontal scrolling. Let's run our app again. Right, with that one line of code, now we're able to scroll. And as we had in our illustration earlier, this is our section. Our section, the first section, has 2 items vertically aligned. If I scroll here, look at that. It also scrolls my second section horizontally. Third as well. Again, before I continue, does everybody have this working?
I still need to see the item spacing. I was trying to
item spacing, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But your error got fixed, correct?
It didn't, but I think it's because I didn't call the configure collection view.
Okay, got it. So the item spacing, we created a constant. That way, if I want to change 5 to say 10, I'm only doing it one place as opposed to doing it all 4 places. So that's the first thing we did here. And next we said the item, let's go ahead and add some content inset to it. Again, inset is take some of the item away, basically create some spacing around it. And here we said NS directional edge insets, which takes in 4 arguments, a top spacing, leading, bottom, and trailing.
Alex, my third section is in a,
Your third section is what?
it's not appearing.
It's not appearing?
Yeah.
Let's see where that could be happening. The third section is not appearing. Did anybody else get that similar situation where this is the third section?
This is,
No, but
What
the
if-
size of my sections, like they resize to be rectangles instead of
Okay. Most probably it's a size issue somewhere, right? So let's review what we have. I'll keep this on screen for now. Our item size, this is where we started with the layout, right? First of all, your constraints, You
I
have
found
constraints.
I
What's
found
that?
my error.
What was the error?
I was adding the items to the wrong section basically.
Oh, in the data source.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Did you do copy paste?
No.
You sure? Just playing. Okay, cool. So you saw that error again. Cool. Very good. Everybody else is good?
Can you go back to the item spacing one more time? I'm still getting an error there.
Item spacing here.
Item.
So we have two lines. The first line is the constant. The second line is, are you using NS directional edging sets?
Nope. Wait, yes. Oh, but I have a parenthesis around it. I'm supposed to put equal. Okay. Yeah.
Very good. Really good. Okay. How are we doing this time? We're doing good. We have 15 minutes. We could do more things. First of all, everybody has their thing scrolling, yes?
Yeah.
Yes?
Okay, last thing. So what did you put after orthogonal scrolling behavior?
Continuous.
False equals continuous?
Yeah. Equal to continuous. But for now, we could see how paging is different, right? Just put paging here, for example, put group paging and run it again. And let's see what behavior it gives us. So continuous before, it like just scrolled, right? If I put group paging, let's see what happens. Now, if I scroll, what behavior did you guys see?
Oh, wait, damn, I missed it. Can you give me?
Anybody feel free to jump in.
It's still going side to side, unless it's on the wrong.
Yeah, side to side, but how did it go continuously or it stopped?
Oh.
Do it again?
Yeah, it like stops at one section and then you have to swipe it to the next section.
Right, so it stops at one group, not section, right?
Oh.
So our group is defined with those 4 squares. So if I say I want the scrolling behavior to say group paging, what happens? It scrolls by pages of groups. Right, same thing for the bottom. If I scroll, it scrolls based on the group. And let's see a different one. If I say centered and run that, let's see how it scrolls. Well, here it centers it, but we don't have offsets. So that's why you don't see exactly the offsets. We'll add some sort of offsets. I want my group to be such that I could see partially part of it like this. So we'll do some configuration to do that, and you'll see what group paging centered is going to look like. Actually, let's do that now. Did everybody get their scrolling to work?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yes. Was there a question? Amini, was that you?
Yeah, I was just saying it works for me. That's all.
Okay, cool. Very good. I need some verbal because I can't see everybody right now. Very good. Thank you. Okay, so continuing on, let's make our group a little smaller, the nested group itself. So go to where it says nested group size. Everybody sees where nested group size is, where it says take the entire width of the container. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, make that 90% by saying 0.9. Because I want to see some of my other group as well. So I'm making it a bit narrower so I could see some of the other group as well. So do it 90%. And let's go up to our enum as well. So make sure you change this. Go to the enum as well. And here we also said, again, we could refactor this to make it change one place. So keep that in mind. So here we'll say make it 90% as well. And remember, whatever this needs to be half of it. So half of 9 is 45. And run the app again. And now we could see partially some of the other side as well. And now if we do group centered, we see the group itself is centered. I could see some of the left side, I could see some of the right side, and so on and so forth. Okay.
How do we get it?
How do we?
Close to the top. Like, how do we center this connection?
We'll add a header as well to give it more appearance.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I think that's the last thing we do for today. So yeah, let's do headers so that we'll add item headers. And I know last week, Tiffany, you were asking like, how can I return specific titles for my sections, correct?
Maybe, I don't remember, but that's a good question. So yeah, I will.
Okay, so we'll exactly do that for you, for us to see what that looks like. So actually, let's take care of that right now. In our enum, let's create one more property. In our enum, my enum, section kind. Let's create a property called section title that returns some string. Based on the case, is going to return a string. So here we'll say switch and we'll say case. Again, I'm just showing that for illustration purposes, but we could have done different ways. There's always different ways to do this. But for now, I'll say return. We'll just say first section again, just for us to see how we could just change this. And here I'll say second. I'll say return second section. And lastly, case third. I'll say return. So now we're about to go build headers that involve some code as well here. So let's first do the header size. So everybody has this computed property for the section title?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's continue on. Go to your create layout, right in the section area. Let's create a header. Well, actually, we need the header as well. So let's create a header, section header. Section header, we'll say it needs a header size, The header size, same as we've been doing with the item size, is of collection layout size. We want the width to be what?
1.0.
Yeah, 1.0, very good. So take
Okay.
up the entire width of this section, very good. So 1.0, and the height we'll use absolute. I want it to be absolutely 44. That's like a hard-coded number. Because to review, the sizes have, we could set up sizes. We can set up sizes using fractional. We could use absolute, and we could use, what's the third one?
Estimate.
Estimate, very good. Awesome. So now we have our header size. Let's go create our header. Our header is of NS collection boundary, NS collection layout boundary. Just type in NS boundary and most likely will get it auto-completed for you. I mean, without autocomplete with Xcode, would be further behind. So just type in NS boundary and you'll get NS boundary item. So this item here is gonna be the type of our section header. Was there a question? I heard some background audio. Okay, so our boundary supplementary item also queries for a size. And you'll see like layout anchors, like please, please, please. I highly recommend watching the 2019 WWC video where they introduced collection compositional layout because it's a very, very good video, really well made. They talk about like anchors and how you could set anchors on your item. There's a lot of things you could do with compositional layout. So highly recommended watching 2019 before 2020, because 2020 uses iOS 14. I would still advise using 2019 as opposed to 2020, because iOS 14, it's still in beta. It's things to come, but this is pretty solid. This is a year of stuff that's been there. So compositional layout, boundary item, and here we need a layout size. We'll pass in the header size. And lastly, we need to add the header to the section using the supplementary boundary items. This is supplementary boundary items. So boundary items is an array of items. Again, you could also have a footer. You could experiment by adding a footer as well, but here we'll have a header to our section. Okay. So this is just adding the header to the section, right? We need to now register. Let me just put some notes here. So steps to add a section to, well, a section header to section 1, define the size, and add to the section. Then we need to, what else we need to do? It's a bit similar to cell setup, right? Same way we set up a cell almost, we set up a header. So what's the important thing we need to do with a collection view and a cell?
You create it using the size.
Create it, yeah, we need some sort of subclass somewhere. But what do we do with that subclass on the collection view?
Is it register?
Register, yes. So register the supplementary. Good. And then we'll dequeue the supplementary view. Good. Great. Those are the steps. All right, so we basically did step 1. Let's go ahead and do step 2 by registering the supplementary view. We don't have a supplementary view yet. We could get one, we could create one. Actually, let's create one now and we'll use the lesson to populate it. So go ahead and create a new file. So new file, it's a CocoaTouch class. What is the subclass of that new file? I'm creating a supplementary view to create a header view for a collection view. What is the subclass?
UI collection reusable view.
Very good. UI collection, very good. UI collection reusable view. Awesome, great. So this is the subclass I need, and I'll call it header view. Okay, and I'll click next. All right. Our cell is UI collection view cell. In that case, our supplementary view is UI collection reusable view. We have some code here. Let's just grab it for now. Again, it's just a programmatic view. So let's get our header view somewhere in the lesson, right here. So just grab that header view here. In the lesson notes and paste it here. And build, make sure you have no errors. This is very similar to our label cell, actually almost identical. Yep, except this. Okay, cool. So we have our header view. Let's go to our view controller and register it according to step 2 here. So let's go to our configure collection view. Right after our register cell, we will register a supplementary view. Register.
Wait, sorry, can you go?
Where you want me to go?
Did I miss something from the header view? I don't think I did. Actually, no, I don't think I did.
I think you're good. Register supplementary view, not nib. Is that it? Yes. So you want to register some class for a supplementary view of some kind with some reuse identifier. What's the class? We just created the class. It's the header view.self. What's the supplementary view we're trying to create? It's a string. We'll use UI collection view, UI collection view dot element kind, not a footer. We're not doing a footer today. We're doing a header. So you want to use element kind section header. And the reuse identifier will say header view dot reuse identifier. Okay. So we've registered our supplementary view. Great. Question, Tiffany?
Yeah, I just wanted to finish review. And that's a yes.
For some reason, the audio is a bit low today. What's your question?
No, I don't have any question. I got it.
Okay. All right, cool. Good. If you do, just feel free, as always. So we have our supplementary view registered. Let's keep going. What's the third step? To dequeue it, correct? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do it in our configure data source. This is where the data source asks for information. So here we'll say right after our data source initializer, we will dequeue the header sub. Okay. So here we'll say data source dot supplementary view provider, very similar to what we did last week. This supplementary view provider itself is also a closure, right? So closures are everywhere in this API. This particular closure takes in 3 arguments. The first argument is the collection view. The second argument is the kind of supplementary view. And the third is the index path. Okay? So those are what we have. Next, we need to use typecasting to get back our header view, very similar to doing our cell for row or our cell provider code where we typecast some type. So here we'll say collection view. Now we want to dequeue. This is what we're doing here. We're dequeuing a supplementary view. So we'll say dequeue. This time we're not dequeuing a cell. We're dequeuing a supplementary view. The kind is kind. The reuse identifier is header view dot reuse identifier, which is a string. The index path is the index path that we have in that closure. And now if we get to this else, we have an error. So here we could just say could not queue a header view. Okay. Now we have our header view. We need to return it. I have an error somewhere. Did I not typecast? I did not typecast. So don't forget to typecast to the type you expect, or else you'll get an error saying not an optional. So here, make sure to typecast to the type you expect. We expect a header view. We typecast it to that. Now we have a header view here. We return it, but we want to configure that view. So configure the header view. Header view dot. The header view has only one element, which is a text label. Text label. Text label dot text. Oh, we need one more thing. We need to know what section we're dealing with. And we'll just use the same sort of logic we did earlier. So we'll say, we'll also use on our header view, we'll also unwrap the section kind in order to use that instance. So here we'll say section kind. And the section kind gets initialized with the index path that we have here, which tells us what section we're dealing with. Like that. So now we know the section, we have a section kind instance. We could come down here and say text equal to section kind dot section title. Is that what we call it? Yeah. Section title. So the section knows about its title. It just returns us the title, and it populates that title in the header. Other things we could do to our header, I think it's center aligned. So we could say text label dot text alignment equal to left. Also, we could change the font. We could say text label dot font equal to UI font. And we'll make it dynamic or accessible. We'll say preferred font. We'll say headline. Feel free to change the font if you want. And you could do background colors. You could do whatever you want here. But that's like the basics of what we need right now. We have the title, some string. We say make it left aligned. And we give it some font type. Any questions about this code here? Again, this is very similar to cell for row. The only difference is instead of saying dequeue cell, we say dequeue reusable supplementary view. Yeah. And our header view is it only has a label, but it could definitely have like an image. It could have anything a view could have, this header view could have. Your header view, for example, could be an entire image. Okay. Let me show you what that could look like. I GitHub. Layout examples here. So your header view could be this entire image here, whatever image you want. It could be anything. So this is, our header view just has a label. All right. Any questions before we run the code and see what we have?
Oh, well, I tried to run the code and it
Crashed?
Yeah.
What happened?
I tried to run the code and it crashed.
Did you register your header view? Well, it looks like I'm getting the same crash. Let's see what we have here. Did you have this crash here? Oh yes, this crash. No element kind for supplementary view. Did we get that?
Yeah.
Okay, because we used the wrong initializer. So keep in mind, if you do get that error, the way to fix this is to go back to where you defined your header here. Our header needs an element kind. The compiler is telling us exactly what we're missing, right? We need an element kind. We have no element kind here. You see where it says header, let header equal to boundary item. This is the wrong initializer. So let's redo this initializer. So the initializer we want to use is the one with the 3 arguments, the one that also has the alignment. Everybody with me? Yeah. The alignment and the kind, right? So we have a layout size, we have an element kind, and we have an alignment. So this is the initializer we need. So for the layout size, we're going to use the same header size. The kind, we're going to use UI collection view dot element kind header. And the alignment, you could align the thing any way you want, but in our case, the most logical place would be the top of the section. So we just pass in the top argument here. And now if we run the app again, this error is not going to happen again because now it knows the element kind, which is section. We could fix this by putting this into a navigation controller, but our section renders. I mean, there's nothing to scroll. I'm trying to scroll up, but there's no more items here. But we have our section name, second section, third section. We could scroll. I wanted to show us one more thing, but I don't know if we have time. Did everybody get? Yes.
Sorry, can I just see the code right behind the simulator real quick?
Yep. So initially we only used the header size, but we also needed to pass the element kind as well. That's why we got that error earlier.
Okay.
Alex, did you add an instance of the section kind to the configure data source function?
1 second. Greg, did you finish with this part?
Yes, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, so configure data source.
Yeah.
Here?
Yeah.
So it takes your supplementary view provider, right? That's where you're having errors?
Yeah, it's the section kind after the header.
Section kind.
Right there.
Right here. Did you put a comma?
Yeah, I didn't add that part at all. Let section kind. Because I wasn't able to add the text, and I didn't know why I wasn't having access to
okay,
it.
got it. To clean up your view controller, you could just embed it in a nav controller, so that way you could see better the first section. So after this, we'll just do that, and then we'll wrap up the lesson. Any questions before we continue?
Yeah, how do I don't like the way the collection view looks, taking up the whole view that bounds. How do I give it
You could use layout, like you could create a view. I'll probably create a view. For the challenge, just create like a view and set it up whichever way your preference is. Like similar to how you do a programmatic view.
Okay.
Yep. But for now, the only thing we'll add is put this in a nav controller. So we have a title, and this is not like hidden by the status bar. Cool?
Okay.
All right. So this is programmatically done. So we need to embed our view controller in the nav controller. Let's go to the scene delegate. In our scene delegate, navigate to the scene delegate, and let's set up some code. window scene. This is good. And let's create our window, UI window. This code is similar to what we've been doing, right? For the frame, we'll say UI screen.main.bounce. We'll say window.root view controller equal to, we want to embed it in the nav controller. Again, I'm just doing this in code because we've done it in storyboard. Navigation controller, and here we want a root controller. We'll just pass in our generic view controller, which we could rename. And we'll say window.window scene equal to window scene. And lastly, we'll say window make
this is also give it space at the top too, right?
What's that?
Also give it space at the top too.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what we have here. We've embedded our nav, our view controller in the nav controller. And here we go. This is nicer, right? And now we could add some sort of title in our configure, in our viewed load. In our viewed load, we could add nav controller item.title equal to, what did we do today? We nested groups.
Oh well, can you go back to the when
the scene delegate? Scene delegate window needs to be initialized. The whole point of we coming here was to add the root view controller as a nav controller, so we could embed our view controller in it, so we could have the nav bar and have our collection view better laid out. We have that. We add the window scene, which we got here from the scene, and we made it visible.
Thank you. And what was the title that you gave it on the view controller?
Almost finished doing that one. The title is Nested Groups and Orthogonal Scrolling. Is all I'm gonna fit. We shall find out. Run it.
Dynamic text.
And it fits. So nested groups and orthogonal scrolling, this is what we did. We have nested groups here, right? And look at that, we have a little scrolling action because now our thing has more space. And here we also have, I wanted to show us one more thing, but maybe we just follow the lesson for that. So you could return different scrolling behaviors for different sections. Everybody with me on that?
Yeah.
Okay, and the notes are in the lesson. If we look at the lesson, I think it's there somewhere in our Enum. Where's our Enum? Navigation. 1 second. So in our Enum, if you're doing the challenge, which I highly recommend you do the challenge, here you could return an orthogonal scrolling behavior for whichever section you want. Okay, Tiffany's question?
Yeah, I'm not seeing my navigation. Oh, duh.
Got it. Very good. So I'll just leave the orthogonal scrolling for you guys to do for the extra credit. Not extra, why do you keep saying extra credit? A challenge, right? So build this layout using what we've done today. You have 3 sections. They're all scrolling orthogonally. Section 1, the item takes basically the entire width, same as all the rest. The heights are different. This particular one, there's 3 stacked items here. And again, it scrolls. This is the App Store, right? If you have the iPhone and you go to the App Store and you go to Apps, right? The App section, you'll see a layout very similar to this one. That'll give you practice for doing header views as well, orthogonal scrolling, and nested groups. Our last section has 2 items, and again, it's a different height.